Hello everyone, and welcome back to my Zero to Hero series for the Elder Scrolls Online. Today we're going to be talking about Day 1, specifically Day 1.0. There's a lot to talk about in Day 1, and so I decided to split up the videos. Day 1.0 is just going to be an overview. We're going to talk about the current state of your character as you arrive from the tutorial areas. We're going to look at areas in which to improve your character from there. We'll go over some goals, and I'll give recommendations for what I think your next steps should be. Before we get too far into this video, I want to provide a disclaimer. This is a disclaimer for all of my Zero to Hero videos. Elder Scrolls Online is an online role-playing game. There are many different ways to play, and not everyone is going to share the same interests. So the strategies and recommendations that I'm discussing are going to be geared towards preparing new players for endgame content such as competitive solo and group PvP, veteran solo content, veteran trials including their DLC hard modes, and veteran dungeons including their DLC hard modes. My reasoning being that any character prepared with that content in mind will be able to experience any content that the game has to offer. So let's talk about the current state of our character. As you arrive from the tutorial areas, I would expect you to be between level 8 and level 11. You're not going to have much money, you're not going to have much gear. Most of your current skill points are going to be coming from the level of your character, and as of this point, there's going to be lots of room for improvement. Your character is a blank slate, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But let's make sure that we move along in the right direction and talk about how to improve your character. There are three main areas for character progression. First and foremost is character utility. This is how much space your character can carry, the speed at which your character is able to move around the map, mostly geared towards your horse improvements, and lastly, your character's ledger domain, which ledger domain refers to the thievery tree in ESO. So how effective is your character at stealing and selling stolen items? The next section is your character's crafting. The way that we're going to improve our crafting capability is through crafting research and the crafting skill lines. Then the third area for character improvement is in improving combat effectiveness, and this comes from gear, skill points, and levels. And I want to caveat levels. This game tries to scale new players up to an equivalent level as experienced or high level characters. And the way that it does that is it compares your character's level to the level of the gear that you are wearing and the improvement state of the gear that you're wearing. So what does that mean? It means that a level 10 character wearing highly improved level 10 gear is scaled to be equivalent with a max level character wearing max level highly improved gear. But a level 20 character wearing the same gear is not scaled to the same level of effectiveness. And so what we'll find is that gear that makes us strong early on into the game will actually fall off and decrease our combat effectiveness later into the game. So that's why levels is a little bit caveated, because with levels you can unlock better skills, better passives, but if you're still using the same gear, you actually won't see that increase in power. Now that we've identified a couple areas in which we can improve our character, let's talk about how. So, in order to improve bank and bag space, it's going to cost gold. If you go and you talk to a banker, when you open up your bank, there'll be an option down in the bottom. It'll say increase bank space, and it'll cost a certain amount of gold. This gold will ramp up as improvements are purchased, and in total, all of the bank space upgrades will cost 768,500 gold. It's the biggest gold sink in the game. that has a practicality effect to it. In order to upgrade bank space, you have to go and talk to an NPC called a pack merchant, and it's the same situation. When you go and you speak to them, you'll be able to pay a certain amount and upgrade your inventory space. Next time you talk to them, it'll cost more, and so on and so forth. These improvements are going to ramp up pretty quickly, and for an early game character, quickly become pretty unreasonable to expect to be able to purchase. The next area for improvement are the horse improvements. This is done, so once you reach level 10 is when you unlock the horse. You receive it in the level up rewards. Prior to level 10, unless you have purchased a mount, you're not going to have a mount available. And that's okay. You don't have to go travel long distances pre-level 10. But once you have that horse, you will go and talk to stable masters, and they will give you the option to either increase your horse's speed, stamina, or carrying capacity. I recommend starting out to highly invest in speed. If you think that your horse is fast enough, you can branch out into the other two. Stamina is mostly useful for PvP, so you don't get knocked off of your horse. And then carrying capacity is, in my opinion, all around decent. Not necessarily as good as speed for an early character that has to do a lot of exploring. The next utility improvement, your ledger domain. How do we level this up? Ledger domain is leveled up by selling looted items to a fence, or laundering looted items through a fence, and by lockpicking. Moving on to our crafting improvements. Crafting research. How do we do this? So there are different crafting benches. There's the clothing station, the blacksmithing station, and the woodworking station. Within these workbenches, there is a research tab, which you can open up, and what that will allow you to do is research traits for different gear and weapons. You have to have an item in your inventory with that particular trait. The trait needs to not have previously been researched, and once you select that item to research, it will be destroyed. So you don't want to use your valuable items to research traits, but you do want to try and keep your traits researching as often as possible. Later on in the game, there will be certain gear sets that can only be crafted after you've researched a certain number of traits for the item that you're trying to make. In order to level our crafting skill lines, for provisioning and alchemy, this is usually done by spamming the creation of those consumables, so making a whole bunch of potions, making a whole bunch of food. For metalworking, blacksmithing, woodworking, and clothing, these are leveled primarily by deconstructing gear. You can get a little bit of XP by making gear yourself, but it's not going to be anywhere near in proportion or as easy as simply collecting gear by exploring, fighting enemies, and then taking it all back to the crafting stations and deconstructing it. Last area to talk about is improving your combat effectiveness. So we mentioned gathering gear. This is done by farming and exploration, as well as by questing. So you can grind mobs. There's certain mobs that will drop certain pieces of gear scattered throughout the region. You can grind those enemies and try and collect gear that way. You can explore and do quests. Most of the quests in the zone, when you complete them, will give you a piece of gear from that zone. And that about covers it for gear. For skill points, you can attain these by questing and exploration. The main quest will always give you a skill point upon completing one of the quests. The zone quests will occasionally give you skill points, and then the next best way to get skill points is through exploration, finding sky shards. Every 3 sky shards will give you a skill point. There's 16 sky shards within a region, so 5 associated skill points. The next way to improve combat effectiveness is through leveling. This can be done by really 2 ways in my mind: questing or grinding. So questing gives you a fair amount of XP. You don't get a lot of XP as you're questing, but when you turn the quest in, you'll gain a very large burst of experience. Grinding is where you take and you pull a whole bunch of mobs, a bunch of enemies, gather them in one area, and kill them all quickly for the experience. This is pretty effective, but generally you're gonna want gear and to be leveled and capable of killing enemies quickly, or you're going to want a partner who can kill them quickly for you while you're in a group together. So based on those means by which to improve your character, I have a couple goals in mind for if you're just starting out. First and foremost, you're going to want to feed your horse and keep your traits researching. Every time that you feed your horse, there's a 20-hour cooldown. This is real time, not in-game time. So pretty much every day, you're going to want to feed your horse. And keep your traits researching. You can research a trait. The very first trait that you research for an item will have 6 hours to finish researching, after which point you can start researching another item. As you research more traits within a single item, the time that it takes to research will increase. So I strongly recommend feed your horse first thing each day and make sure that your traits are researching before proceeding to work on other things, because while you're working on those other things, the timers can be running down for your horse and your researching. So next goal that I have is to gain levels. This is followed closely by gaining skill points. Then I would say gathering gold comes in as next priority. And then last but not least, all of these goals are important, is the goal of exploring the map. And this is going to open opportunities for you to find lore books, sky shards, dolmens. Lore books will increase your mage's guild skill line. Sky shards obviously going to give you skill points, and then dolmens are the dark anchors. You'll see them on the map represented by the symbol, and these are good sources of experience, and specifically Fighters Guild experience. The first time that you clear a dolmen, you'll get a big burst of experience, as well as a bunch of Fighters Guild experience. And the Fighters Guild and the Mages Guild lines are very important for you to be maxing out as you progress through the map. Speaking of the Mages and Fighters Guild skill lines, they are my first recommendation for day 1. So, collect the Mages and Fighters Guild skill lines as quickly as possible. These are skill lines that will give you passives and abilities that will enhance your character's combat effectiveness considerably. In order to start these, you need to go and talk to a hall steward within the respective guilds, and it's very easy. You go and you speak to them, you go through some dialogue, and you're invited to join. You get the skill line. Super simple, doesn't take a lot of time. I think it took me less than 3 minutes to get both. My next recommendation, obviously feed your horse and research traits when the options are available. Then next recommendation is to do the main quest up to the specific quest, the Tharn Speaks. Doing the main quest is going to give you skill points, it's going to give you jewelry, and it's going to give you levels. And the jewelry that you get is really powerful for newer characters. There's a set of jewelry prior to the Tharn Speaks that you'll attain that will give you magicka cost reduction, magicka recovery, a lot of early skills for characters before they are morphed will have they'll cost magicka, and they will scale in damage or effectiveness with magicka. And so having a set of jewelry that is magicka based is very beneficial early on. On top of that, it gives you an idea of what you're working with. It teaches you the lore of ESO, what you'll be running into as you progress through the areas. Doing the main quest is very worthwhile. The next thing that I recommend is to complete zone quests. These will give you skill points, and they will also encourage you to move around the map, which will help you explore for lore books, sky shards, and dolmens. Lore books are going to give you Mages Guild experience, dolmens are going to give you Fighters Guild experience, sky shards are going to give you skill points, and then on top of that, you will be getting skill points for completing the zone quests. Very worthwhile to be doing. Last, again not least, gather gold until you have enough to buy the 6,800 bank space upgrade and the 5,900 bag space upgrade. These are the last upgrades that are really feasible for a newer character to get prior to unlocking higher or better ways to supplement your income. So, the way that I recommend to gather this gold, first and foremost, do your crafting writs. I'll have a guide coming out here soon giving more of an overview of the crafting system. The quick overview for crafting writs is you speak to individuals who will certify you in the crafting skill lines, and then you will be able to pick up daily writs for those crafting skill lines, which will require you to make and turn in different items. They don't take very long to complete, and you can make 2.3k a day doing them, as well as gaining other supplemental items that are generally pretty valuable as you turn the quest in. The next recommendation that I have is thievery. I'll have another guide for this coming out on my channel. Through thievery, you can make 2k to 11k a day, depending on how often you get caught and the quality of the items that you're stealing are. So at this rate, you will be around 1 to 3 days to gather the gold. You could probably do it in 1 day if you're maximizing your profits on thievery, as well as exploring, doing some quests, and gathering gold in an alternative fashion. Once you have that bank space and that bag space acquired, then it's a pretty good idea to start proceeding to the next region after you've completed all the zone quests to proceed with the Tharn Speaks in the main quest. A couple ending notes and tidbits that I want to share before we close out the video. Store all of your crafting materials in the bank except your provisioning and your bait materials. This is done because crafting materials stored in the bank are shared throughout your characters. You may only have one character at this time, but it will help you moving forward versus if you filled your bank up with a bunch of other things, then doing that inventory management later on, trying to sort through all the gear or whatnot that you have in your bank and get all of your crafting materials in, it'll be a big time sink. Better to start out storing the crafting materials in the bank right away. And we don't store the provisioning or the bait because you want to keep those on your main character. Typically, your main character will do all of the provisioning and then provide that food out to the other characters through the bank. As well as the bait, there's a couple achievements in the game for fishing, and they're pretty tedious to get. Most players will only want to get those achievements on their main character. They won't want to go for fishing achievements on multiple characters. So that's why we'll keep the bait on our main character. The next note that I have is now is a good time to create and try out new characters before getting too far along with one character. So if you finish the tutorial quests or you're working your way through some of the recommendations that I've given so far and you find yourself kind of on the fence about the character that you're using, think maybe you could have a more enjoyable experience with an alternative character, now's a good time to create that character, experience, mess around with the different classes, different races, and find something that you like before you invest too much time into one character that you feel like, oh, I can't make another character and make that my main character. I've already invested too much time in this character. The last note that I have is as you hit level 10, PvP and dungeons will become available to you. I don't highly recommend participating in this content at this time. Without a proper gear or character setup, these areas of content are going to be really difficult, and I would even consider them discouraging for a newer player to participate in. That's not what I want. I don't want you to jump into something that you're not prepared for, get discouraged, and then set the game down and never come back. I want you to enjoy this game as much as I do, and so that's why I'm not really talking about PvP and dungeons in the day 1. I will be covering them in day 2, and you can stay tuned for that. With that in mind, my parting tip is when you unlock Cyrodiil at level 10, there is a skill line called, well, there's 2 skill lines associated with PvP, Assault and Support. The first skill in the Assault skill line is called Rapid Maneuver. This skill, when activated, grants you Major Expedition and Major Gallop. Major Expedition will make your character move 30% faster. Major Gallop will make your horse move 30% faster. If you travel into PvP and you complete the tutorial quest or tell your Grand Warlord that you don't feel it's necessary for you to participate in the tutorial quest, that will grant you access to those skill lines. And Rapid Maneuver is really good for moving around the map, exploring, getting the zone quest completed. And so if you wanted to travel into Cyrodiil, the PvP zone, and gain that skill line for that skill in particular, that would be a good idea. That's all I had for day 1. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next one.